Good afternoon, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani coming to you from Melbourne. And this is Career Care Package 144th episode. And today we are talking about how recruitment agencies work and what does a recruiter do. We are not doing the recruitment consultant 101, but we want to take a little bit deeper dive into the new and emerging technologies used by the recruitment consultants and the recruitment agencies all across to find the right talent. And to help us answer these questions, we have got Simon McSorley, who is the founder of Crew Talent. Is that right?
Yep, Crew Talent Advisory. Crew
Talent.
Talent.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And before we get to speak to Simon, let's welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, Nash. Feels only like about a few hours since we were on live. And Simon, our guest this morning did a Scooby-Doo impression, so you might need to do something to actually beat that in your answers. So, but really happy to be here and very excited to be talking about recruitment and what a recruitment consultant does and what actually happens when your resume hits the desk and what recruiters look for. So very excited to be here, and thanks for joining us, Simon.
No, more than welcome. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. So maybe that's a good place to start. For you to tell people about your business and what you actually do as a recruiter.
Yeah, sure. So I own a business called Crew. We work solely in the technology space, predominantly with SaaS and sort of product businesses. We do some work in the consulting sphere as well. And our main specialization really is around product development, design, engineering, data, depending on where you come from, and DevOps. So really that's sort of the sort of contemporary tech space. So I suppose any thoughts or opinions that I share are probably going to be pertinent to the space that we work in. For recruiters that might work in more blue collar type roles or casual type roles, I probably couldn't comment on there, but I can probably give a more holistic sort of overview of how recruiting businesses work and how recruiters operate. But there's probably nuances around some of those other different sort of spheres, if you like.
So maybe a good way to unpack it would be, can you tell people what a typical day of yours looks like? What your, what from start to finish, what do you have your hands in?
Yeah. So we've got a team of 7. So we're supporting, at the moment, I think we're supporting 8 clients. So we'll be meeting with HR teams, understanding more about specific roles. We'll be meeting with hiring teams, understanding how a specific role is going to get interviewed, what skills we're looking for, what type of personal skills as well as technical skills are going to be the right fit for a role. We're going to build hiring plans for those teams as well. So how many interviews are we going to have? Who's going to be in those interviews? What do those interviews look like? Is there going to be any technical testing? Where does that sit in the process? So really building out the plan of how we're going to hire, defining what sort of person we're going to hire. And then internally we're talking and building plans around how we're going to attract or go out and find candidates that fit that brief from the customers.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that make sense? That's sort
of... Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, you go.
It's okay. No, sorry, I interrupted you. So you're about to say something.
So we'll be doing that stuff, a lot of the planning around campaigns, we call them. So campaigns for separate roles. Then we'll be doing a lot of activation around those. So if we feel that a role, for example, might need more exposure within some online platforms like Slack, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, we'll build out lists of those target groups that we want to be showcasing a particular role in. We'll do research on which Slack channels have the most followers, for example, which ones are the most active. If we're going to be posting on LinkedIn, we'll research which tags we should be using, which hashtags. So some work we're doing at the moment, AWS and AWS jobs, on the surface of it seem like the same thing, but they're actually different. One's got a huge amount of followers, one hasn't. So if we're going to be spending time and energy in posting across different platforms. We want to make sure we're getting as much leverage and as much visibility as possible. So we'll do a whole bunch of that stuff. So activating all of that, screening candidates, managing inbound applications, actually interviewing, sitting on interviews with customers, with clients, with hiring teams. At the end of an interview process, we'll debrief with hiring teams as well. So everyone who's been in a hiring process will get together in a room or a virtual room, talk about shortlists that we've interviewed, talk about pros and cons. We have very mathematical ways of working out who might be the best fit for a role. And then we're making offers, we're rejecting people, we're organising onboarding. So this full spectrum from planning a campaign, activating, managing it through, and then closing it out.
Wow.
Yeah. So, Simon, one of the things is we most of the time get asked is around what happens once the application really hits the spot. Like you've received an application, whether that was through LinkedIn or whether somebody approached you directly, or whether that has come through an online jobs board. What happens then? If you can help us really, unpack that whole mystery, because there's just too many different concepts out there around whether, people use certain softwares, people sometimes don't use certain softwares, but what are your, what's the best practices around, really, screening those applications out?
Yeah. I'd like to think that probably most technology companies recruiting teams or hiring teams are leveraging technical platforms for inbound applications, or for resumes that are getting referred in. They get put into a platform of some kind. They sit against a job requisition that you have open. I think probably most businesses these days are running some kind of platform like that. I mean, Seek has Seek in the back end for employers has some simple buckets. So all your applications come into a bucket, and you can shortlist or reject from there, and then you can move them through a workflow. So they all have that for helping manage your data and your volume of resumes. In terms of what actually happens, applications come in, you'll see them in a list. Sometimes depending on the volume that you're getting, sometimes it'll take two of us to work through, depending on timeframes that we're on. So two of us, you start from the top, I'll start from the bottom. With some customers, we have at the back end, we'll have pre-built filters into the application process. So do you have work rights in Australia is a big one. For anyone that's a no, they're just getting filtered out because we just can't employ. Do you meet a certain amount of criteria? We probably only really want to be talking to the people that meet those. If we can save time not having to go through 400 applications and just talk to the 20 that we already know fit the criteria, then that's time well spent, right? It means we can have potentially 20 relatively meaningful conversations with a long list, and then cut that down to a short list. So again, I think my advice for anyone watching would be, if you're applying through Seek, for example, and there is built-in questions, answer those. They're not always ticked as mandatory, but answer them, because you're making it easier for people to make decisions, potentially a positive decision about your application. So we get a long list of some kind, and from there we're trying to, I use 20 earlier, so I'll keep going with that. Out of that 20, which of those are people that are going to make a short list of people that we really want to get to know, get some really good understanding of. Who are the people that we're going to spend time telling all about the business, giving them as much information as possible, because we think there's a good chance that they're going to fill the role. I think it's kind of important as well for people to understand that recruitment's, it's kind of an exclusionary exercise, and if that's a word, but it's an exercise in excluding people from a process. You can't interview 400. You want to interview, like deeply interview, 8. So you're finding reasons to excuse and get these people out of a process. So for applicants, I think, some of the age-old stuff that we talk about, good quality cover letters, CV that is relevant to the role, not just the standard one you roll out for every job you apply for, whether it's marketing, development, or shelf stacking. Have a relevant CV to the role you're applying for.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, I think we do say to people, it's a screening out process rather than a screening in, but fundamentally it means that you've got to make it, like you say, really easy for people to understand why you're applying for that role and why you're a fit for the role. I was curious about all of the channels that you use. Are you headhunting sort of from those channels, or you're advertising in those channels? Say, for example, like a Slack channel, would you post an ad in there, or would you be looking at how people are interacting in that channel?
Both, depending. It depends on the size of the candidate market. So if it's a really small candidate market, we probably need to do a lot more direct approaches, headhunting, if you want to call it that, where we think there's a larger candidate market and the campaign is focused more on attraction, because attraction is as hard to get right as having very targeted discussions. You want to attract the right people, not attract everyone, not all the people, just the right people. So if you attract all the people, all 400, you've bought yourself another problem, because you've got to reject people with empathy and correctly and in a way that treat everyone in a way you want to be treated. You want to make one. You don't want to try and solve one problem and create another. So depending on to answer your question, depending on the role, you're either posting something and hoping that's going to generate inbound inquiry from the right kind of people, or you're looking at how people are interacting. You're looking at what other people are posting and cross-referencing that against a LinkedIn profile or an online portfolio and thinking, I think this person's definitely worth approaching. And you're crafting and concocting an email or an in-mail that's going to at least get a response. Something different to, saw your profile and
think you look amazing.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So with if you're looking, say you've got a resume, and this is one of the questions we sort of discussed, and a candidate has other profiles. They might have a LinkedIn profile, they might have something on GitHub, or they might have something on Twitter or wherever. How much weight do you give? What are you looking for there? If you've already got, say, a resume from a candidate, what are you looking for in other platforms where they might appear?
Yeah, it's a good question. So some of the recruiting platforms that we use will use the email address that's given in that resume to go out and source all your public profiles. Because most people use the same email address for all our social profiles, right? So when an application hits in the profile, the platform will automatically put in links to a GitHub, a Dribble account, a Facebook, Twitter. So we're not having to go out and find you. It's all presented to us. We're probably looking for consistency. If your resume says you've done X, Y, Z, or you delivered this piece of work, or you feel really passionately about test-driven development, and I jump into your Twitter feed and you're talking about how much you hate test-driven development.
It's another day at the office.
There's probably like a lack of congruence there. So I think we're probably looking for this, not necessarily looking for anything specific, but does everything add up? Does this seem like, on the face of it, someone that I want to talk to? And for some of the roles we're working with the customers at the moment, part of the requirements for that role is someone's probably going to have to be really comfortable at speaking at conferences and that sort of thing. So if resumes come our way or profiles come our way, and there's links to a talk that somebody did at a conference, or they host things like this where they're talking about test-driven development or whatever it might be, then that's probably a pretty good indicator that they're kind of hitting a few of the big ticket items for us that make us want to talk to them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
we got just wanted to welcome Balin and Poonam. And Balin's got a question which is an interesting one. Jason, hi to you, and Stuart will come to your question quickly. So Balin's question is that when you are in a job, one gets a lot of call from the recruitment agency, but once you're out of the job, you seem to have those calls being dried up. What's the rationale behind it? It's like you're no longer a hot property in the market, and because you're now not working, you are, you kind of, we won't consider you. What's the rationale behind it?
Hard for me to comment on everybody else, on what everybody else does. But I it's something I've heard before, so I understand what's being asked. I don't know, is the short answer. I think a part of it is we've got used to some myths in recruitment. One of them is this thing that if you're not in a job right now, then maybe you're not that good because you'd be employed, which is of course total nonsense, because you can be in between contracts and taking a break. You can be on a sabbatical, but it's one of these things that I think for some reason it's a myth that we've allowed ourselves to believe. Like passive candidates is a myth. I only want to talk to passive candidates, or recruitment agencies have this thing that you should let us recruit your roles because we only deal with passive candidates, the ones that you can't find. Well, that was great before LinkedIn or social platforms, but now anyone can find anyone. It's the world's biggest database. So passive candidates don't exist. You're either looking or you're not. It's really simple. I think coming back to the question, I don't know why that is. Is it this myth thing? Possibly. I don't know, and it's hard to comment on other people. I do think though, and I'm sure this is something we're probably going to come to, that if you're in job seeking mode, you kind of got to own it. That's your thing to own. No one's probably sat there going, if Dave applies for a role today, we're going to say no. But equally, they're saying, if I get a great application from Dave, hey, I'll definitely talk to them. It's you kind of got to own it as a job seeker. It kind of is a full-time job, I think, getting a job.
Yeah, it's a funny thing about the passive. You hear it all the time. The best candidates aren't working. I don't know if you can say. Obviously, can't say that now, but that myth of the passive candidate is pretty pervasive, and I'm not sure why. I mean, everybody goes in and out of jobs all the time. People's jobs change. There's restructures. Yeah. So I just think maybe Balan with that too is it probably seems like that, but there's all those things around checking your resume, checking your LinkedIn profile, putting in it, making sure you match the requirements of the role and that type of thing. But yeah, it definitely was a very pervasive myth that best candidates are actually working. So yeah.
I think you can feel it more when you're not working as well. Like no one's calling me. Like
I know.
And I'm not saying that's not true in this case, but I think when you're not working and you want to work, it feels closer to home.
Yeah, it does. So Stuart has made a point. He said Simon's point is very relevant of this exclusion. Can you please have him explain later the level of feedback provided to the long and short list candidates? So I guess it's, how are you providing feedback? Are you providing different feedback to people who are on a long list or a short list, and how you go? What kind of feedback would you actually give?
Yeah. For people that just aren't making a long list, it kind of has to be by definition a relatively generic response. We for most of our clients, we all these sort of responses we pre-build out with customers as well. So we're using the right tone for customers. For some of our customers, we provide some links. Hey, join, follow us on social. Sign up for job alerts. Here's some links that other people have found useful for job searching. Start up big job board, things like that. So again, using the 400 applicants analogy, it's impossible to sit there and individually respond to 400 people. For long listed candidates, the response would be different. It might be, hey, you made it to the last 20. Unfortunately, couldn't include you in the shortlist. If you want some specific feedback, I'm happy to give you some. We can arrange a call or email me and I'll share it with you. But again, when if you're going back to 12 people and you're running 5 roles that day, writing 50 whatever it is emails starts becoming it's this huge chunk out of your day. That being said, we also recognise that people have gone to the trouble to apply. If you've applied and you've written a tailored cover letter and all that sort of stuff, you've done all the right stuff, you deserve. It's only fair to give someone a personal response. So as much as you can, we will. And for people who interview and don't make it, it'll always be a call or a video call like this and talk through specific feedback. And I think that's the beauty of us working so closely with clients. You're able to gather very specific feedback from interviewing panels and be able to feed that back to candidates who are unlucky. Sometimes you can have a short list of 3 people that if you had 3 roles, you'd hire them all. We don't. So sometimes we're talking very small margins, and they're the hardest calls to make. People that you really like, you've probably got to know them over the course of a month through a process, and you almost become friends. I think probably 50% of my LinkedIn network are probably people who've got to that level and just stay friends with. But so there definitely is different levels of feedback, if you like, and I think they're probably appropriate to the amount of time and investment that someone's gone through. You don't always get it right.
Yeah, we just have got a question on similar, just on that topic. Poonam says that she just got a rejection email from a recruiter for a role that was very well aligned and suitable to her skills. And they almost asked me for joining date and everything. And when I asked the reason for rejection, the recruiter said that they just advised that they had filled the role already. So I think the client would have filled the role already. That's what I'm guessing, Poonam. And that's what, does this happen often? Because it could be very excruciating for a job seeker, where he or she feels like now it's right in front of me. I think I've got the role and everything else, and suddenly something happens and they just can't comprehend. They just can't make the whole sense of these things, right? What could be going in the background? Because I have got a theory that sometimes the recruitment consultant can't review everything because that might put their relationship with their employer in jeopardy, or could be confidential. It could be many things. But what could be some of those reasons, Simon? This might happen.
I think it's so. I think a good thing to do when you're applying is look how old the job ad is. If the job ad is over a week or so old, people have probably started moving through that process. So you very rarely get to the end of 3 weeks of getting applications and then go, right, now I start. Quite often you're getting applications hitting in there. If it's a role where, and again coming back to our planning, if we know that there's 25 other roles being advertised or being hired for the same as yours, you need to move quickly with people. So in the case of the person with the question, I forget the name, that they could have applied and seen this amazing job, but the interviews might have started happening a week and a half ago. So by the time that person's applied, you could be on 2nd or 3rd interviews, and that job's getting closed. So it is timing as much as anything else. So there's that. Sometimes roles get filled internally. With again 90% of our clients, we're in on their Slack channels, so we're advertising the roles internally, looking for referrals. Sometimes you'll get someone apply internally, and every business is trying to show that you can build a career here. You don't have to come and just do this role. We're cross training. We want to give people the ability to stay with the business if they're good performers. But if their interest changes and now they want to do this, you kind of owe it to yourself to try and fulfill that. So sometimes that happens as well. I think I would hazard a guess the vast majority of the cases, though, are the prior scenario. Your application is hit and the process is already started. So my advice is check how old the job ad is.
Mm.
If it's
So for this market, Simon, has recruitment changed for you for this market compared to pre-COVID? Are you doing things differently, apart from sort of the Zoom type screening, but in terms of how quickly you might get through interviewing, or like, has anything changed during COVID?
in the tech space, I think it's speeding up.
Yeah.
So I think what we've seen with the market is, when we all went into the first lockdown, everything sort of froze, and projects were put on hold. That new product launch that we were talking about, that got put on hold because there was just this uncertainty in the market. I think we went through probably a couple of months of everyone trying to figure out what the future looked like, and managing risk, and we saw unfortunately layoffs and people get furloughed and all that sort of thing. But I think what happened was the market went, you know what, we can't keep living like this forever. We've got to get going. Like we've got to make stuff happen. So we've seen hiring start to pick up, and certainly in our space, it's started gathering momentum. So I think where people were unfortunately laid off, they're now suddenly finding themselves really in demand. So we've seen this speed pick up, and I think we've got some really solid recruiting teams in Melbourne. We've got some great tech companies, and they've got some really, really solid recruiting teams who know how to activate campaigns quickly, who know how to keep the momentum going with hiring managers, getting through interviews quickly and getting roles closed out, tweaking their process where they have to. Things will move quickly. So I think in our space, it's adapting to the market. I think it's understanding your competition in terms of how many similar jobs are being advertised. So I'd like to think we get relatively granular. So if we were advertising for a Java role, we know the total size of our candidate market, plus we know how many jobs are being advertised. We've got some very simple metrics where we can figure out, we probably know how long this role is going to take and what that process is going to look like. So being able to understand those things is important. So I think it's speeding up, if anything, to answer your question.
Oh, that's great news.
Or not.
That's really great. Another thing was around the kind of body of work, or you mentioned about that the new applicant tracking system or the platform where if the job seeker has used the singular email everywhere else, it just gets everything that the job seeker has done, whether on GitHub or anywhere else. What are some of your suggestions on building body of work? Because it is becoming increasingly important, where we talk about personal branding and we are talking about content creation and everything else. What are your suggestions around building a body of work on internet? I think that everyone should either go and get your own domain name and create a website, because 5 years down the line, I don't even know how many people will be on LinkedIn, how complex it will become. It's becoming already noisy, crowded marketplace. And if you got your own website where you can store every bit of information about your professional stuff, I think that goes a long way. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think for the right skill sets, I think anything in the creative space, you should absolutely be having some kind of portfolio. There's no reason why a project manager couldn't have an online portfolio where they've got pages dedicated to a project they've delivered. You could talk about the complexity, the budget, the problems they face, how they overcame them. Why couldn't you do a Google Meets call and with one of your stakeholders where you reminisce about the challenges you faced, and you had that on your portfolio? Why couldn't you do a Google Meets call with your stakeholders where you talk about the benefits that project brought, and they gave you a testimonial? Why couldn't you do that? Like, you could. It's not hard to do. Would it make you stand out as a project manager if I could sit there and listen to your stakeholders talk about how together you work through problems, and they gave some dialogue around what you were like as a leader? I absolutely want to talk to you. So I think it's kind of possible for any role. If you're in accounts payable, but you probably still could do. You might not have the skills to do it yourself, and you could learn them, but you could do it. Would it make you stand out from every other accounts payable person in Melbourne? Probably. So I think they're a good thing. I did a talk, I can share it with you after, on our YouTube page. I spoke to a product manager we hired who's probably got one of the best portfolios I've ever seen, and he gets really quite granular with some of the products he's built, not just around the functionality, but why decisions were made. You spend 10 minutes on that, and I'm thinking to myself, got to hire this guy. I've got a client who would love this, because the problems he talks about in his portfolio directly related to some of the problems that a client had with a role, or what they were looking to solve. So I absolutely think, if you can build it yourself, do it. If you want to engage someone to do it for you, you could probably get a uni student or a graduate web developer from General Assembly or something like that to help build. They'd probably love to do it as part of their portfolio to build your portfolio. So you could probably do it relatively cost effectively. Think about what you can include in it. Go and talk to some of your stakeholders. See if they'll do a 5-minute video call with you. Do a LinkedIn Live with someone where you talk about it. Get some of your old project team on a LinkedIn Live call where you talk through. You get your camera up there and you talk about, hey, remember when we got to this? How did we solve that? What was the thing we did? The only thing that's stopping you doing it is your imagination.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, I think we keep talking about the importance of online branding, and the tools are there. The tools are free. It's easy to make a YouTube video. You can jump onto Canva and do a little clip. Like, they're very easily accessible. But I don't think people really have embraced it. And if you look at the quality of people's LinkedIn profiles, sometimes you really have to, wonder when they updated it last and that type of thing. So I reckon that's a really great message that you've put out there, Simon, about you can really stand out if you just do some basic things. Like, and you don't have to produce a Hollywood movie. You can just have a decent conversation or an enthusiastic conversation with someone. And Nash, that worked for you when you were in India. Coming back to Australia, we've been running these LinkedIn Lives, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that you got hired.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why, absolutely. It's the body of work that is consistently being thrown, out in the public. And, a lot of people make this, big hoo-ha around content creation and everything else. I'm pretty sure Simon and KB, we've been using LinkedIn since 2006, 7, 8. And one of the things that I did back in 2011, 12 is that I consistently shared a lot of good, blogs and articles. And that's what I did. I never wrote anything, but I consistently shared those things out there, which created a body of work. People continuously, came to me with, hey, Nishan, you shared that. I really liked it. Can you, tell me more about that? And I think that's pretty much it. I don't think so that it requires, huge amount of production. Whatever that you have, just go, give it a go. May not be video, but I think what Simon says, I really like that getting on, call with somebody who will be your stakeholder and discussing and having a genuine conversation about what really made the difference in that project. People will see the gold into that. Wow, you can have that kind of conversation, which you can never, ever put it on the resume.
Yeah.
It's a very single-dimensional product, resume is, right? You can't really give that in-depth. And I'm pretty sure, Simon, do you see that, how do organizations move beyond the resume? What are some of your thoughts on even moving forward 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line? Are organizations seeing to move beyond the resume? And what are some of the things that even job seekers can do to adapt to this changing world?
Yeah, I don't think resumes will go away, because most people follow the path of least resistance, and it's easier to just write a load of dot points about tasks you do and hope that you get called back. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's what most resumes I get are. They're a list of tasks. Very few talk about what was the benefit of you being in that job, what value did you bring. Just a list of tasks, and that's why probably most of them go. Now, I had one today, someone calling themselves innovative. There was nothing in their resume that was innovative. But seriously, I looked at the work they'd done, list of tasks. There was nothing innovative about it. So, we love buzzwords and we love, that sort of thing, but unless you can back it up, don't bother. People can go on our site. We've got a whole bunch of free templates there. Just you can go and download them for nothing. Just take them. There's tips on how to write a resume. There's some tips on a cover letter. There's a simple spreadsheet. We can just track the amount of jobs the jobs you've applied to. Just fill in a spreadsheet. So when I call you in a month's time and say, "Hey, you applied to our role," you go, "I can't remember which one that was. You have to tell me about it." So as job seekers, we've got to own it. But again, to your point, I don't think resumes will go away. I think the content in them could. If the content was a link to your portfolio, if your resume said, "I've got an online portfolio that talks about all the stuff that this job says it needs. Here's the links to the individual pages." Your resume is just the delivery system for me getting to your portfolio. That's what I'm interested in. I don't really care about the content of your resume filling a certain need, as long as it's telling me what I need to know. It doesn't have to be a certain format for me to go, "That's a good resume." It's the content I'm interested in. And if the content is a link to something that tells me how you're relevant to the role, then that's good enough. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you got, we've got a few more minutes with Simon. If you got any questions, please drop it in the chat box, and we will take it. We'll ask those questions to Simon. One last question for me around you've seen that you started to see some movement in the tech space that you primarily recruit in. What are your obviously you recruit all across Australia, but what are your observations in the overall recovery as in the recruitment space? Do you think that is going to pick up once we come out of the woods, at least in Victoria, once the lockdown eases and everything? Do you see that the recovery will start to slowly, gradually build up?
Yeah, I think the budget today will have a fair bit to do with it. I think today's budget is going to create a whole bunch of opportunity. I think the consulting businesses that deliver that kind of work, I think a lot of that stuff is going to be sort of federal government type level work. So I think digital invoicing and all that sort of stuff. So being able to transact easier. So I think a lot of those will be delivered by government bodies or consultancies, that service providers that work with them. So I think that will create a lot of opportunity. I think Melbourne, as we get out and people will start returning to work, I think we'll see a pickup. I think B2C type businesses that are providing services might still see it being a little bit lumpy, depending what they're selling. Obviously anything travel or tourism related out of Australia is going to be a struggle. You look at some of the local businesses like Rome to Rio. I love that business, but you have to think with very little travel happening at the moment, they'd be facing some challenges. Possibly not going to go away anytime soon. So I think at the flip side of that, I think that some of the pivoting we've seen has been brilliant. Harder to pivot a whole tech offering, a whole product offering really, really quickly, but I think we're starting to see some of that. So I think we're in a moment in time. I think we're doing a whole lot better than a lot of our overseas compadres. I don't know why I say compadres. So I think we're doing a lot better than some of them. I actually feel positive about where we'll be. I think everyone's trying to do a bit of a last run up until Christmas, and then hopefully for Australia, everyone's sort of getting a decent Christmas break, and then we're kicking into next year.
Simon, what about in terms of recruitment itself as a function changing? So, your role or your firm's role in terms of the recruitment mix, because, you see a lot of, it's easy to find people now, but, whether it's easy to attract the right people or build a relationship with the right people is a different question. So how do you see the role of a recruiter changing as we sort of move into the future not necessarily because of COVID, but just because of general changes in technology and so forth as well.
Yeah. I kind of liken our role, I call our role high-level problems, people-based problem solving. So as we're talking, I'm just getting a message on Slack from one of our customers asking about how one of their roles compares to others of a similar nature in terms of, and asking for some data around that. So, I think modern day recruitment teams are part mediators, part advertisers, needing to understand some digital marketing, copywriting, need to be able to write compelling ad copy. Part project managers putting together, careers pages that are really highly functional, as well as able to attract and sell, highly functional. Got to be good negotiators, negotiating with candidates, but also internally, negotiating on what is and isn't achievable. Part psychologists, understanding people. Got to be admin gurus, got to be able to work through a ton of admin. The back end, it's you've got to be really well organized, which is not good for me. It's a job where, like, seriously, no 2 days are the same. We get to work on, we've done a whole employer branding work for people, so we've got production capabilities, so we've produced careers pages, we've produced employer brand focused video and photographic production. So we get involved right from the beginning through to delivery around specific roles. So challenge strategy now is forming a big part of what recruitment teams do. So what's the business trying to achieve, and how does talent underpin that, and how do you make those two things work? And then the tactical stuff around delivery that informs that, kind of separate skill sets, but all kind of the same, if that makes sense.
So the days of slapping an ad up on Seek and just managing the screening is well and truly gone out the window.
Yeah, I think for highly evolved talent functions. Yeah. We see recruitment ops now. Rec ops is becoming a real thing. So how does recruitment working with learning and development? How does it tie with the broader HR team? I know recruiters that sit in with product squads. Actually sitting with a squad, when for some of our customers, we go to our squad stand-ups. We get to understand the teams, the personalities in the teams. How's someone going to complement that team? Is it overly male heavy? Spoiler alert, most of them are. How do we get some diversity into those teams? And what sort of do we need to balance out the personalities? Is it all overtly forget the word I'm looking for. Is it all overtly introverts or extroverts? How do we help get some balance into there? How do we help hiring managers interview really well? Very few hiring managers get taught how to interview. We all kind of do it by osmosis. So we sit on interviews with customers and help them get better at hiring. So it doesn't stop. You've got to evolve with market demands.
Well, that's excellent, Simon. And Lahiri, Paras, and Prashant will probably take your questions on a Friday. But Paras, your question could also be answered by our guest coming on Thursday as well, around the tech areas such as RPA, AI, and ML, which none of them I can really fully. These are all abbreviated. I don't know what do they mean. So we'll probably ask one of the recruiter coming on Thursday if you can hold on to your questions. But Simon, thank you again for coming along and sharing some of your ideas and insights, from recruiter point of view, because we are always interested to know, what recruitment consultants really think through. Because, if you understand, where they come from, it just helps, as a job seeker for you to position yourself appropriately. So thank you again, Simon, for coming along.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevi, okay, so I'll probably do that. We are taking a break tomorrow, so there'll be no LinkedIn Live tomorrow. So you also can take a rest and enjoy your afternoon doing something. And we'll be back on Thursday again, and we are speaking to another recruiter specifically into tech space, but she's going to talk about which are the hot jobs available right now. Her name is Khushbu. She's coming on Thursday. And until we see you tomorrow, look after yourself. No, we are not seeing you tomorrow. We are seeing you Thursday. Until we see you, all of you on 47 hours, please look after yourself and your loved ones and stay safe, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank